Hey guys, I'm MultiLockOn, and I just posted my new map Legion, and I wanted to do a kind of off-the-script commentary just on my thoughts on Legion and, how it plays and how it looks and, just things like that. So just a quick note before the video starts, the gameplay running in the background right now is mostly my point of view. I'm not normally this terrible. I don't know what it is about Halo 5, but sometimes I'll get on and my shot's amazing, and then other times it's complete shit. I'm sure it's like that for a lot of people. But when I was recording for the video, I didn't have the luxury of having my really super skilled friends online. So I had a few buddies hop in and we recorded the video. So it's not the highest level gameplay, the kind of level that I would have liked to show, but just enjoy it for what it is. I'm not going to go into the super nitty gritty as of, every detail why I did what I did for this map. And I talked about most of that in the thread for Legion that I posted on Forgehub and Forge.World. So if you're interested in the more in-depth stuff, I do have a link down below in the description if you want to check that out. So in terms of map design, I like to think that there's different levels, of map design, the lowest level being, kind of like a 3-lane design, like what we see in Call of Duty. There's 3 lanes on practically every map, and there's no real rhyme or reason, to go anywhere, to break your ass down any of the lanes in either direction. It's just kind of 3 lanes, and it's really shallow. And I think the next level above that would be holdout design, I call it, kind of like Lockout and Guardian, where there's a map with a very clear and distinguished power position, and just the key is to hold that position. And I would consider that above 3-lane, but still really shallow, when I first played Halo when I was younger, maps like Lockout and Guardian were just really, really cool to me. And I'm like, wow, this is an awesome map, because, you're not used to that kind of stuff in the shooter industry anymore. Most maps are pretty, primitive, so things like Lockout stand out. But I think, relative to, classic arena shooters, that's still really shallow. And then above this, I guess we would have player cycling as a 3rd level of map design, a map that kind of like Damnation, kind of strict pathing that, forces players up and around the map to be constantly moving, which is nice, but I don't think it offers the freedom that I would like to see in a map that truly emphasizes, individual player skill sets. And what I mean by that, I think the highest level of map design, and this is just a thing that I've come to think on my own after, years of forging and designing maps for Halo, and, just seeing how map design works for different video games. But I would think the highest level of map design you could ever reach is really just a sandbox experience where, the players can truly just make the decisions that they want. A map that still promotes movement and, all those aspects that are good, but it's not limiting you in the way that, in Damnation, there's a lot of strategies there are, but it's not the same kind of experience you'd have, playing chess, where, you could totally approach things super differently while still being aggressive. And I think the sandbox design that I'm talking about, that I've talked about in my map design videos, is really just the highest level that you can really ever achieve when you're designing maps. And ultimately with Legion, I really just wanted to create a map that, promoted all these good things, like verticality and player cycling, but ultimately was this supposed sandbox experience where, players wouldn't have to change their game or adapt to the map so much as adapt, to the players that they're playing against, and really approach each situation how they felt like they should approach it. And I think I got that. I mean, if you were to look at the first 5 games I played on Legion when the map was finished, people were saying the top is super strong, like no one would leave the top catwalk ever, the entire game. And they were saying you need to nerf it, bring it down, expose it more somehow, I don't know. And then 5 games later, into test matches, no one's going up top, no one's even using it. And then people are saying it's too weak, and there's no reason to be up there. And I didn't even change anything. And then 5 games after that, all of a sudden everyone's up top again. And I think that was good for me to kind of wait and watch how people adapted to the map over time and learned how it played and how each other played, then immediately going in and changing things. And I think that really kind of showed me that the map could evolve with the players. And the best thing your map could ever be is, so flexible that it holds up over 100 games, over 1,000 games, maps that they don't stagnate, it's always fun to play because it's always forcing a player, to think and make decisions and, do all these things. And I think those are the maps that truly should be in, in matchmaking and tournament play and, really high level games. And I'm not saying anything about Legion, should be in matchmaking, but I think this kind of style of map is really important to have if you're looking for longevity and like a true meta that can develop on your map over time. And Legion in particular has a very high learning curve just because of how like unusual the map is. Differences in map knowledge are going to be very, very apparent right off the bat, between teams. But once both teams know the map equally, and it's not about, like I know this jump and you don't, but it's about who can outplay the other team using the map, that's when it becomes really fun. And, the map, it's not as approachable as a lot of maps are, and that's not necessarily like a good thing or a bad thing. I think there's a lot of maps that are much more accessible, which are fun, like right off the bat for a lot of players who download them, and so they have a better time, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being accessible. But there's just like a lot of unusual things about this map, like the pyramid, if you see it in the gameplay in the background, it's a very unusual shape, and I don't think you'd ever really see something like that in a dev map. And it's very abstract in the way it functions and how you can use it, and like the line of sights it blocks and the kind of combat it breeds, and that's fine, like things like that come with time, and it's really like a flexible structure. And you've got all these, like the overshield atrium's really interesting to fight in, and you've got like the moving rock, which is, it's kind of cool. It has a lot of really cool things that I never intended when I was first designing the map. Like a lot of really interesting combat happens there, and it's just a really flexible map to play on. Like over time, you'll really learn these things, and it shows. Like over multiple games. So I mean, if you're expecting to download the map and just play your first game on it with your buddies and just have like the best 2v2 experience of your life, you're not. I mean, it's not. I mean, it might. I don't know. It might happen, but realistically, like a design like this, it takes time to really sit with players, and like it shines over time. Like the more you guys play the map and the more you guys learn the map versus other maps, which might stagnate. And it doesn't have, I think, the accessibility that a lot of maps will have. And because of that, I think a lot of people won't like Legion, and that's fine. It doesn't. I'm not saying, like meta and accessibility are opposite ends of the same spectrum and you have to choose one, because that's not true. You can totally have like a really, really deep and, thought-provoking map that's also really accessible. It just so happens that I think Legion's a lot more abstract than a lot of maps that most people are going to play. And a lot of the functions and a lot of the geometry on the map is open to a lot of the player's interpretation right away. And I think that's really important for how the map is going to evolve over time. And on the note of like some of the abstract structures, I mean, some of it is just stuff that's going to be so subtle that you might never experience. You might experience the first game. I mean, just things like the moving platform, for example. Like it basically floats back and forth from one end to the other of the overshield atrium, and there's a death pit between you. And there was a time when I was on one end of the atrium, and there's another guy on the other end, and we're shooting each other. And then the rock floats between us, and he chucks a nade off the rock as it floats between us, and it bounces and it kills me. And I thought that was just so interesting. Like I had never thought it'd be used in that way. And then like I've seen people, throw splinters through like the little rock hole that the floating platform floats through, and to block it off so that you can't take the moving platform, or block the window slit at the bottom of the atrium, or jump up the rock as it moves down, and at the midpoint to get to the top. I mean, it's such a flexible area, and I think a lot of things like that, like people are just gonna look at the map initially and be like, wow, like there's like a floating rock, that's really stupid, I'm not going to do that. And I heard that, someone was playing the map at one point and they're like, I'm not going to take a 20-minute elevator ride at the top of the map. And and that's things like that I expected when I was designing it, because I think the map almost makes people feel uncomfortable when they can look at something and not immediately know what it does, which is the nature of building something a little more abstract and flexible. Everything you make in Forge is going to be criticized by someone, and most of the time people aren't always going to see what you're saying, which is fine. That's human nature. But like for example in Legion, the high catwalks are so far out of the way, it makes combat kind of hard when you're shooting someone across the map and you don't have red reticle, but you can see them, but you can't kill them. And some people don't like that, and they'll say you have to get rid of that or bring them closer or something. But they're not always seeing the big picture, like the options you get from the high catwalk, how you can control the overshield atrium, how you can choose your descents in the map, and how you want to approach different situations, or maybe people like right below you. And so people aren't always going to see what you're seeing, and I got a lot of criticisms for that. And you know what? That's okay, because that's totally normal. And you've really just got to accept that, some people aren't going to like the same things that you like. Legion in particular is going to breed a very aggressive playstyle, which I like. I want to promote a map that doesn't do anything but force players to move and push and do something, And some people say that they've told me, that Legion in particular, it forces a very distinct play style, that it's a very narrow-minded thing, and that it's almost contradictory to what I'm saying and how I want to allow players to, like, play how they want, but I don't want, players playing passively. And I don't think that's true. I'm just going to say, I don't think camping is a play style. I just think that's, you being a pussy. That's not something that I want to promote on a map that I'm making. And I think a good map design will promote movement in a way that you can still play how you want, I think, Legion, for a lot of reasons that you can read about in the thread, you can play sneaky, you can traverse the map differently, you can get around, you can flank well enough, you can choose to use the tops a lot, you can choose to just stay down low the entire time, you can ignore the power-ups and bait them, you can use them to your advantage and stack them, and people have told me that they think that it promotes a very narrow playstyle, and I don't think that's true. I think that the map is just designed in a way that it promotes movement and it rewards, I guess, is a better word. It rewards aggressive play, and I'm okay with that. As long as you're moving on the map and you're breaking that 50-yard line and you're pushing and you're trapping, I think you're going to be in a good spot. And I think, how players choose to do that is totally up to them. And that's why, when I look at it, I don't think it's a narrow playstyle. Some people do, and like I said, that's okay. That's how some people look at it. And I've just got to learn to accept that. And a lot of this stems from, my obsession with Halo Combat Evolved, the original Halo. And, there's so much individual empowerment in that game, and how one player can just single-handedly, kill an enemy team without, the need of team shot, because of how fast, weapons kill in Halo Combat Evolved. And Halo 5 is a very different game. I can't take a map that might work in CE and put in Halo 5. The kill times are very different, the movement speed, like the range of the utility weapon in relation to how players move is very, very different from Halo 5 to Halo CE. But what I can do, when I reward players that work together well, I think that's also a very good form of individual empowerment. It's not necessarily about team shotting so much as, you're saying, hey, this guy's here, I put 2 shots on him. You're in an angle, where you can see him, but I'm not. And that kind of teamwork, I think, is really important for individual empowerment, and especially in a 2v2 environment where it's just you and your partner, it's just you two guys. When you can say something like, you finished the kill that I started because you can do it and I cannot, I think that's a really good individual empowerment. And I think there's a lot of potential for that in 2v2 maps that most people don't tap into. I think Legion is really good about really covering all angles from 2 players' perspectives. From really controlling the map just from 2 different players in relation to where they're standing. And I think it's really good individual empowerment in that sense. So am I happy with how Legion plays? Yeah. I love how the map turned out gameplay-wise. Absolutely. I think it forces teamwork, and I think that's really important for not just team gameplay, but just the importance of a single player in relation to his team. I think it's very individually empowering. And I think a lot of players will download the map, play it once or twice, get confused, and never touch it again and hate it. And that's also okay. I think if you're looking for a map that you and your friends can play kind of like casually and just kind of jump into and have fun, there's probably 100 maps out there that do that better than this. I'm not going to lie. I think there's much more accessible maps. And if I could, I think I would make this much more accessible just to kind of get that audience, without sacrificing gameplay. But I can't, and not in this case. I think the map is going to evolve well over time, just in my opinion. It might not, I might be crazy. But what I can promise you, absolutely, what I can promise is that your 5th game on Legion is not going to be anything like your 1st. And your 10th game is not going to be anything like your 5th. And your 20th is not going to be anything like your 10th. I can promise that the map is extremely flexible, if nothing else. If you're not fond of the playstyle, that's completely fine, and I know a lot of people won't be. Do I think it'll do well in the Forgehub competition, the 2v2 thing, which I designed it for? I don't think so, and let me explain why. I think the judges are actually very, very capable. I think it's Chunk, Warholic, Goats, and Examples now. I think it was Doju announced Examples. And I think it's a very well-rounded panel of judges. And I kind of know their preferences and the kind of maps they like, but obviously I'm not going to speak for them. I just don't think this map's going to be nearly as accessible as they want it to be, because I'm assuming that they're going to want these 2v2 maps even afterwards for a contest. And I do think the map holds up well over time. I think it'll do well in an environment where it's being played repeatedly, but I don't think they're going to be looking for that for the contest. I could be wrong. It could do great. Probably not, but I guess we'll see. Aesthetically, just real quick, I dive into why the aesthetics are the way they are in the thread. Again, if you're interested, there's almost like a science behind it. Am I happy with it? Kind of. When I first forged Legion, like the first 2-3 weeks Forge came out in this game, at the time, I remember looking at it and being extremely happy with it. I thought it was one of the better looking maps I had seen so far from all the forgers that I have seen. As they do with every forge that comes out, standards skyrocket. Like the first 3 to 6 months, I mean, they're flying up. And maps that were good the first couple of weeks don't necessarily look as good anymore, you know, as they do now, 1, 2, 3 months later down the road. How well this map will age, I don't know. Visually, I don't know. I do know if I were to make it now, there would be some things that I would change piece-wise. You know, just maybe forge some things differently, make them look different, or maybe for conservation sakes. I like the theme. I think the theme came out well, but I think piece-wise, I could do better now. I just don't feel like going back and reforging it. Some of the set things that you'll see in the map, like the teleporter hall, I'm pretty happy with. A lot of people, I think, have even copied that. I've seen a few maps since I've started testing Legion that almost use that same concept of like a teleporter hallway. The Reaper that floats above the map, I don't know if you've seen it during gameplay. It's a Reaper or Timekeeper, whatever you want to call it. It's just a thing that floats back and forth, and it'll time the overshield and camo. So you can see that in the gameplay in the background. If you want to rewatch the gameplay and mute my stupid voice, so you don't have to hear me like run my mouth, you'll see like the players like look up at the thing floating back and forth to see when the overshield and camo will come up, which is kind of a cool concept. And I've seen a few people pick up on that and do some interesting things with scripting that are even cooler than that. So anyways, thank you for watching. I have more map design videos coming out. I think 2-3 more. Sorry, they take a long time. I'm really lazy. I have 4 or 5 maps, I think. I'm going to post more in Halo 5, and then I'll probably quit if I'm telling the truth. But we'll see when that time comes. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you guys soon.